back in the first book of Kings. We're just staying in check, searching for the Melchizedek. We're in the Malachim Aleph, or the fourth book of the prophets, beginning with the death of David. And David is succeeded by his son Solomon, who receives wisdom from the Most High and builds the temple. Solomon then begins worshiping other gods in his old age, and Hoa promises that the kingdom will be split. Following Solomon's death, his son Rehoboam becomes king over Judah and Jerusalem, while the northern tribes appoint Jeroboam as king of Israel. Elijah the prophet features prominently at the book's end, performing miracles and demonstrating Hoa's power. This is key information, background information, outline for this video. We're talking Malachim Aleph, the fourth book of the prophets, the first book of Kings, O Jacob.
Chapter 2. Now the days of David drew nigh that he should die. And he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. Be thou strong, therefore, and show thyself a man. And keep the charge of the Lord thy God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes and his commandments, and his judgments and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that thou mayest prosper in all that thou doest, and whithersoever thou turnest thyself. That the Lord may continue his word which he spake concerning me, saying, If thy children take heed to their way, to walk before me in truth, with all their heart and with all their soul, there shall not fail thee, said he, a man on the throne of Israel. 9. And it came to pass, when Solomon had finished the building of the house of the Lord, and the king's house, and all Solomon's desire which he was pleased to do, that the Lord appeared to Solomon the second time, as he had appeared unto him at Gibeon. And the Lord said unto him, I have heard thy prayer and thy supplication that thou hast made before me. I have hallowed this house which thou hast built, to put my name there forever. And mine eyes and mine heart shall be there perpetually. And if thou wilt walk before me, as David thy father walked, in integrity of heart and in uprightness, to do according to all that I have commanded thee, and wilt keep my statutes and my judgments, then I will establish the throne of thy kingdom upon Israel forever, as I promised to David thy father, saying, There shall not fail thee a man upon the throne of Israel. But if ye shall at all turn from following me, ye or your children, and will not keep my commandments and my statutes which I have set before you, but go and serve other gods and worship them, then will I cut off Israel out of the land which I have given them. And this house, which I have hallowed for my name, will I cast out of my sight. And Israel shall be a proverb and a byword among all people. And at this house, which is high, every one that passeth by it shall be astonished, and shall hiss, and they shall say, Why hath the Lord done thus unto this land, and to this house? And they shall answer, Because they forsook the Lord their God, who brought forth their fathers out of the land of Egypt, and have taken hold upon other gods, and have worshipped them, and served them. Therefore hath the Lord brought upon them all this evil.
The New World had garnered great interest since 1492. The sensation of the Columbus voyage had already faded by 1519, by which point the Genoese had been dead for over a decade. But in Mexico, new discoveries emerged, things that had never been heard of before in Europe. Even the Bible was unaware of these lands, they say. We'll find out. Let's get it. The Latin translation of his reports even uses the capitalized term Don for the ruler of the Mexica, Moctezuma II, Xocoyotzin. His first report of 1519 gave the impressions that negotiations with a foreign ruler were carried out on an equal footing, just as the Catholic monarchs of Spain had expected when they sent Columbus on his journey in 1492. But Columbus had failed to discover any states or powerful kings in the Caribbean, they say. What Cortez described was much closer to the original version, or original vision, in Emperor Charles V, therefore instructed him to treat the new subjects as well as he would vassals in Europe. So initially they're saying Charles V had the intention of treating these so-called Indians as they would vassals in Europe. But what ends up happening is that these people end up becoming slaves and being oppressed and unalived by the Spanish conquistadors. Are you tracking? The inhabitants of the Caribbean at that time had a long history. During this period, complex social hierarchies arose, such as that of the Taino, who were divided into subgroups and inhabited, among other places, the islands of the Greater Antilles, specifically being Haiti, aka Hispaniola, or Cuba, aka Fernandina, and Boricuen, aka Puerto Rico. Faced with frequent natural disasters such as hurricanes and floods, their religious practices were a means of serving the common good. They also formed a link to the realm of the dead, who were venerated in a prominent ancestor cult. Keep that in mind, venerated ancestors. But peace did not last long. The Spaniards' second attempt to found a settlement, La Isabela on the north coast of Hispaniola, failed. So the Spanish tried to set up in Haiti, but peace didn't last long. It got active. The initially harmonious relations with the surrounding villages deteriorated rapidly after Taino chiefs or caciques found that the Europeans wanted to stay permanently. So initially they might have been cool, like, all right, you can come and visit, check out what we got going on, but y'all got to go. Europeans had other ideas. And this is your original slave trade. Make it make sense. It's easy. You don't got to overthink it. You got all these people in these surrounding areas that know how to work the land, even up into what we know to be America, Mexico, and these islands specifically, Fernandina, aka Cuba, and Hispaniola, aka Haiti. Check it out. Let me know what you think. Leave a note in the comments. Let's go, Jacob. Stay with me. We're talking indigenous laborers. Indigenous laborers. Ovando had introduced this system of allocation or entrustment of the indigenous population in order to avoid open slavery. Under this arrangement, the conquerors and later the settlers were allocated a certain number of indigenous people who were compelled to work for them. They were responsible for the education and Christianization of the native peoples entrusted to them. The Spaniards saw the indigenous people as cheap slaves to be exploited at their whim. They accepted their decimation because they considered the locals to be pagans and barbarians. Again, we're talking slavery here. I mean, what can I say? You don't gotta make this up. Why go to Africa when you have all these people here in the Gulf of Mexico? The indigenous population resisted, but the Spaniards violently brought them under control. Those who weren't killed were enslaved. Simple. Later reported extensively on the brutality of Spanish warfare on this once fertile, rich island. What happened to the cacique Hatui from Hispaniola? So there was a chief named Hatui from Hispaniola, or Haiti as we know it, who fled to Fernandina or Cuba from the Spaniards and became a leader of the resistance. He refused baptism because he did not want to end up in the Christian heaven. So Hatui was popping off. He didn't want anything to do with what the Spaniards were talking about as far as Christianization went. The mainland, the province of Tierra Firma, was no longer a blank slate for the Spaniards. Columbus had discovered the South American mainland on his third voyage. Yet the continental character of these regions remained a mystery. So they really didn't know what they were going to find. They may have had an idea, but they didn't know really what it was going to look like. It remained a mystery. Other seafarers had also explored the coast of South America as far north as Florida and carried out raids. So they were familiar somewhat with the land as far north as Florida, they say, and carried out raids. Again, we're talking Pirates of the Caribbean here. The conquistadors were wrecking shop in the Gulf of Mexico. Columbus accidentally came across a large trading canoe on his first voyage off the Honduran coast. The paddlers were numerous, and there were also several lavishly dressed men among the crew. So they saw this canoe and were intrigued by how lavishly dressed these folks were. They couldn't believe it. The Spaniards marveled at the exquisite and finely crafted garments, the weapons with stone blades, probably made of obsidian. We're talking volcanic glass here. So not only were they exquisitely dressed in fine crafted garments, but they carried around volcanic stone blades. That's where you find obsidian. Imagine that. Just so start to visualize what these people could have looked like based off the information we've gathered so far. We're talking Dracons in America. The Spaniards undertook a preliminary expedition to Yucatan at the beginning of 1517. It was just one of the usual campaigns to capture slaves. Come on, man, I can't make this up. Here, Velasquez pledged to them, in quotes, the next available Indians. However, as had happened on Hispaniola earlier, the privileges had already been allocated in Cuba, and despite the constant slave hunts on the neighboring islands, indigenous workers were scarce, they say, so they were hunting Indians to make them slaves. Come on, man. Emperors or empires such as Tikal and Calakmul were ruled by god kings who maintained a magnificent court, while the king was the mediator between the divine and the human realms. A caste of priests dispensed precise astronomical knowledge. Again, we're talking skywalkers here, people that knew how to traverse the sky by way of the Little Dipper. The Maya developed a hieroglyphic script which was recorded on steles and in books made of bark paper. So they like to say they couldn't read or write, but yet they mentioned that they had books. So keep that in mind. The astronomical knowledge of the Maya was paramount. The calendar priests who possessed this knowledge had the important task of positively influencing the future. For this purpose, they made regular astronomical observations of the course of the stars. They were also responsible for forecasting the future. So these priests had the duty specifically to predict future events, to make sure they stayed out the way or did what they needed to do to avoid any types of destruction or to gain blessings. They shouted in their language, Ma Kuab Tan, Ma Kuab Tan, meaning, or what came to mean, the Yucatan, Ma Kuab Tan, and christened the area with the name Yucatan. So the natives shouted Ma Kuab Tan. Spaniards didn't know what they're saying, but they interpreted that as Yucatan. The Maya people approached them in large canoes. The Europeans noticed the Maya's civilized clothing. Again, create this image in your mind based off the information. Connect that with the original Malakim Aleph drop, and then it'll all start to make sense. The Maya fought with bow and arrow, obsidian swords, lances, and stones, and protected themselves with cotton armor. Another thing I want to note is these people were specifically good with cotton. Just let that sink in. Cotton specifically. Just connect the dots. They entered battle with war paint, decorated coats of arms, and standards. So they weren't just running around without a shirt on or no, you know how they be making them look. They had decorated coats of arms and standards. They were a warrior people. By all appearances, the indigenous population was not in awe of the Spaniards. They thought they smelled funny mostly and were wondering why they weren't leaving, but they weren't afraid or scared of them by any means. When they were invited to a city they called Cairo, again, we're just connecting the dots here. A city called Cairo, there they witnessed large dwellings and temples, cobbled streets and marketplaces. But the Icab were not as impressed by the Spaniards' glass as the Taino had been earlier. So once they got to the Yucatan, the same, sleight of hand magic tricks, they were like, get out of here with that. That might have impressed the Taino, but that don't mean nothing to us. Saying the women were modestly dressed and the inhabitants eagerly paid homage to their idols. They even observed crosses there, which undoubtedly fed speculation. So not only did the Spanish find exquisitely dressed people with obsidian stone blades, they also observed crosses there. Come on now, make it make sense. How do you discover a place in which there's already a people? Again, we're referencing slave trade here. This is where it started, right here in the Gulf of Mexico. From Santiago de Cuba, aka Fernandina, all the way to Cozumel, Chichen Itza, all the way up to Totonacapan. Come on, man. All the way to Florida, Tierra Firma. You can't make this up. Let me know what you think. Leave a note in the comments. We're talking indigenous laborers, they say.
Zocalo is the common name of the main square in central Mexico City. Prior to the colonial period, it was the main ceremonial center in the Aztec city of Tenochtitlan.
Ego Trip Beats.
It's so small. It's so small. See?
All right, let's go. We're just staying in check, searching for the Melchizedek. Peering from their ships, the Spaniards once again witnessed sophisticated architecture. We're talking sophisticated architecture here. The devil's in the details. And intensively cultivated land. The Grijalva immediately held a worship service and officially took possession of the land or island for the crown. Juan Diaz described the dwellings and streets in utter amazement. He described the dwellings and streets in utter amazement. They almost looked as if they had been built by Spaniards. So basically what he's saying is they're so magnificent. There's no way they could have built them. It almost seemed as if we built them. We're talking sophisticated architecture here. Don't worry. We're going to connect the dots. I got you. Don't worry about it. We're talking old world technology here. We're talking right here in America. These old world buildings that you think were for whatever they said they were on Wikipedia, them were the same palaces these Khans and Khanims were living in. We're talking right here in Mexica. The Maya reacted coldly. However, when Grijalva asked for gold in exchange for the goods they had brought, they ultimately sent a brother and a son of their leader to demand that the Spanish leave. There were dead and injured on both sides, including Grijalva himself. Vividly, there were reports of a plague of locusts that made fighting difficult for the Spaniards. You cannot make this up. A plague of locusts that were on the side of the Maya, making it difficult for the Spaniards. They finally found a safe port at La Laguna de Terminos. Grijalva further took advantage of the lively canoe traffic to take captives. So again, this is all about capturing slaves, conquering land for the crown. You can't make this up. Here they were immediately caught up in sea battles with the Chantal Maya of the central village. Again, we're talking in a sea battle, meaning the Mayas had a navy as well. They were fighting them on the sea as well as on the land. The locals were caught off guard by the power of the ship's guns and proceeded to hold negotiations, they say. But again, it's going down in Prophet's Town. Some 75 nautical miles further west near the present-day city of Coatzacoalcos. Okay, we're talking Olmecs, Coatzacoalcos, the coastline of the Gulf of Mexico. After another 120 nautical miles, the Spaniards happened upon an island where they had a shocking encounter. Juan Diaz tells of their seeing massive buildings on high stone pedestals, decorated with alien sculptures, they say, apparently made of marble. We're talking magnificent stone palaces. We're talking old world technology, old world architecture in Mexico. The men discovered a sacrificial stone in the bodies of some recently sacrificed people, as well as a structure with skulls and bones, a zampantli, they say. So again, we're just connecting the dots here, man. We don't got to make it difficult on ourselves. We're talking massive buildings on high stone pedestals. One of the prisoners fetched from the ships had to explain the ritual to them. The priests tore out the hearts, they said, of enemies captured in war and made burnt offerings of them, cut off their heads, and later consumed their arms and legs, they say. So again, we don't know if these stories are embellished to make the people look so barbaric, to make the Christian Spanish look better, or was this really happening? We really don't know. But we can find the little small details and connect the dots to make this make sense. Fittingly, the Spanish christened the island Isla de los Sacrificios. Because the people here spoke a different language, their translators were at pains to make themselves understood. This population, the Totonacs, had settled in eastern Mexico, in the state of Veracruz, same as the Olmecs. The Mexica called the region Totonacapan, and among the most important were Pampantla in the north and Sempoala and Xalapa. Archaeologists assume that the Totonacs also inhabited the early, already deserted city of El Tajin with its famous pyramid. Beyond the usual agricultural products of Mesoamerica, the Totonacs' land was known for its cotton. Come on now, known for its cotton. We're talking slaves. We're talking cotton. We're talking Totonacs. Come on, man, you can't make this up. Who better to work the land than the people who've already been working it and are extremely good at it? The Totonacian cities were already paying tribute to the Mexica. King Moctezuma had subjugated them in the 15th century. Again, we're talking Games of Thrones here. Come on, man. This ain't no willy-nilly. This is high-level politics, high-level architecture, man. High-level society here. The governor of Moctezuma greeted them deferentially with a ritual involving incense, because the Spanish didn't smell very good, so they always used to burn incense whenever the Spanish came around. The Spanish once again took possession of the land for the crown and brought various objects made of gold. Juan Diaz reported that the indigenous people even explained to them how they had melted the gold. So they were smelting and building and planting and tilling the land. These people knew how to melt gold and had magnificent stone pedestals and marble palaces. Without attempting to restore the biblical view of the world. So again, we're talking biblical view. We're talking First Kings, the Malachim Aleph. We're talking about the Mexica and their connection to the Bible. Thus he wrote that the native inhabitants of the Spaniards met along the way were all circumcised, and that not far from the furthest reaches of their voyage, there lived Arabs and Jews, they say. You cannot make this up, man. So again, are we talking America is Egypt? Or you really think shit's going down over there, man? Come on, get out of here with that. He also noted that the population worshipped a large white marble cross with a golden crown upon it. You cannot make this up. So the Mexica were circumcised. They wore magnificent clothing. They knew how to till the land. They had an idea of a cross already and were highly sophisticated. Starting with Columbus, the Europeans did not want to trust what their senses told them about the new, aka the old world. The term conquistador or conqueror was adopted and was used in the 13th century as an honorary title for King James I of Aragon. Again, we're talking biblical prophecy here. Repeatedly emphasizing the long history of the fight against the infidels or the Moros. The Matamoros, the Moor slayers. So not only were they subjugating the so-called Indians over here, they were slaying the Moors over in Europe, which was now being continued in the New World. The Alala or Alala as the battle cry of the Mexica has had been the battle cry of the Muslims, they say. And the mosques in their letters to designate the temples of the indigenous people. Come on, man, you cannot make this up. Let me know what y'all think. Leave a note in the comments.
And he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thine altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. And the Lord said unto him, Go, return on thy way to the wilderness of Damascus. And when thou comest, anoint Hazael to be king over Syria, and Jehu the son of Nimshi shalt thou anoint to be king over Israel, and Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abel-Meholah shalt thou anoint to be prophet in thy room. And it shall come to pass that him that escapeth the sword of Hazael shall Jehu slay, and him that escapeth from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha slay. Yet I have left me 7,000 in Israel, all the knees which have not bowed unto Baal, and every mouth which hath not kissed him. And Jehoshaphat the son of Asa began to reign over Judah in the 4th year of Ahab king of Israel. Jehoshaphat was 35 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 25 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Azubah, the daughter of Shilhi. And he walked in all the ways of Asa his father. He turned not aside from it, doing that which was right in the eyes of the Lord. Nevertheless, the high places were not taken away, for the people offered and burnt incense yet in the high places. And Jehoshaphat made peace with the king of Israel. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat, and his might that he showed, and how he warred, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah?
In particular, the myth of Quetzalcoatl, the last priest king of the Toltecs, the myth of Quetzalcoatl, the last priest king of the Toltecs, had a lasting influence on the Mexica's religious beliefs, all of which laid claim to the Toltec heritage. We're talking family, lineage, bloodline here. One among these heirs of the mythically transfigured Tolan was the ethnic group of the Mexica. According to linguistic studies, their origins can be traced back to nomadic peoples. Pay attention. Their origins can be traced back to nomadic peoples who migrated south of what is now northern Mexico and the southwestern United States. They were in search of better living conditions. We're just connecting the dots, staying in check, searching for the Melchizedek. There are numerous sources for the history of these migratory movements. Some were written before the arrival of the Spaniards, so this information was here before the arrival of the Spaniards. Others were after the fall of the Mexica Empire in the form of illustrated manuscripts. The Mexica's place of origin was either Chicomostoc, the site of the 7 mythical caves, each of which produced a Mexica tribe, or it was the island of Aztlan, from which the name Aztec was later derived. So they are not sure exactly where the Mexicas are from, but there are 2 stories saying they're from Chicomostoc, which we've touched on previous videos, as well as Aztlan, where the name Aztec was later derived. The tribal god Huitzilopochtli, who is said to have spoken to his people during the migrations. So again, we're not know if these people are venerated ancestors or actually gods. Some chroniclers of the 16th century as a former human leader encountered there a heterogeneous world of multiple city-states. The Mexica reached the hill of Chapultepec with its freshwater springs where they drove off the Chichimeca. Afterward, they married into their master's family and provided them with military services. So the Mexica drove off the Chichimeca, and the Chichimeca's daughters married into the families of the Mexica. They also spoke the same language, Nahuatl, and they relied on the guidance of priests. Are you tracking? And played their ritual ball game. Come on now. Who's really playing ball here? In doing so, they developed their own distinctive identity. What's the only people in the entire world with the distinctive identity with no connections to any other cultures or lands because their history has been taken from them? Just meditate on it, oh Jacob. And we're talking kinship with other tribes. They were therefore well suited for permanent settlement in the Valley of Mexico. Indeed, in 1299, they say, the Mexica had to flee when the Colhuacans retaliated for their having killed the daughter of the local ruler and ritually flayed her. So, is no love lost here between the Mexica and these other tribes. Again, we're just following the drinking gourd here, connecting the dots. Most sources agree that the Mexica chose an inhospitable island in the lake. According to legend, They saw there an eagle sitting on a prickly pear cactus and fighting a snake, as their tribal god Huitzilopochtli had prophesied to them. So allegedly there's a god, but we learn that this god may have been a man, Huitzilopochtli, who prophesied. Come on, we're talking prophets here. They almost certainly encountered and then pushed out the previous inhabitants. Come on now. We're talking Joshua and Moshe. Previous inhabitants pushed them out. Got to get rid of them Canaanites. They shared the island with the Tlaltelolca, with whom they had a kinship, but also a strained relationship. The nobles' privileged position was based on their descent from the Toltec kings, man. We're talking the first book of Kings, the Malachim Aleph. Position in society was based on the descent from the Toltec kings and from the so-called creator deity, Quetzalcoatl. It was not equal to the birth aristocracy and was abolished by Moctezuma II. So again, we're just connecting the dots. Of course, the nobility also revealed their power through the size of their palaces. Come on now, the devil's in the details. We're talking old world Mexico and the connection to the Israelites in the first book of Kings. The Mexica Empire presented itself to the outside world as a warrior society. Internally, gender relations were more balanced. They corresponded to the sacred principle of complementarity. So you got as above, so below. You got fire and water, male and female. We're talking Omediado here. They played a central role in the religious ideas of the Mexica, but they were fundamentally equivalent and both essential for the functioning of society as a whole. Thus, a woman who died in labor was considered equal to a warrior who lost his life in battle. So, keeping this bloodline going, keeping this society going was equally as important as protecting it. The importance of these books to the Mexica is shown by the fact that either the consolidation of power or the Tlaltawani Itzcoatl had the pictorial traditions both of the subjugated peoples and his own burned in order to invent a story that corresponded to a greater claim to authority. So again, they were burning books, not just the Spaniards, but the other kings, so that other peoples who they subjugated couldn't claim rights or to the throne or to authority. So this is real deal Game of Thrones. Nothing like that TV show. This is way colder. The Mexica scribes were able to record many glorious military deeds, and the Mexica's territory extended to the present border between Mexico and Guatemala. Their political rise was accompanied by the ascendancy of their own language, Nahuatl. So don't let them tell you they didn't speak or write. We're talking Nahuatl, their own language. In this way, they followed in the footsteps of previous empires. As successors of the glorious ancestors, they were thus able to legitimately invoke the time-honored tradition and felt obliged to do so. Conquests were a task given by the gods, they say. Moctezuma II Tlatoani with his name, hence the sobriquet Shakoyazin, meaning the younger. So Moctezuma was the younger, Moctezuma Shakoyazin. So these are titles, not necessarily names. This perfectly fulfilled the requirements for an heir apparent. His great-grandfather, Moctezuma I, had consolidated and expanded his empire. His grandson, Ashakayatl, followed him as sovereign before Moctezuma II was chosen in 1502. So we're not as far removed as they make it seem, and we really can't trust this dating, honestly. He graduated from the nobility training of the Kalmakak and became high priest of the temple of Huitzilopochtli under Ahuitzotl. So again, he was given an office on the war council. So we're talking Malachim Aleph, the first book of the Kings. The investiture of a new ruler was an elaborate process. He was transformed from one prince among many into a singular ruler and demigod, endowed with special powers that needed to be handled with great care. Again, we're talking like Solomon with his wisdom, special powers. You can't make this up. And a crown made of turquoise. Turquoise established proximity to the fire god of Shui Hektekutli and assured the transfer of the divine qualities to the ruler. So again, we can't trust necessarily what they're saying about gods and men because we don't know who is who necessarily, or if these are just venerated ancestors. The Talal Tawani wore precious arm and calf bands and magnificent feathers. We're talking the land of the feathered serpent, which was located in a huge, bustling palace. I cannot make this up. We're talking old world Mexico. They too built new palaces whose majesty trumped that of the other existing stately homes. The Talal Tawani had landscaped gardens and a zoo. There was also a wing of his palace where people with physical deformities lived. So, again, we're just meditating on this. Again, we saw the National Palace in Mexico. We're talking a wing of his palace. The Talal Tawani wielded ultimate power and made decisions about life and death. Again, talking the kings of Judah and Israel. The Talal Tawani had complete responsibility for the welfare of the state and extended to the supervision of the religious realm. So again, if the ruler is preaching idolatry, the people follow idolatry. If the people or the Talal Tawani or the Khan is preaching righteousness, the people follow righteousness. He took care of the priests and the holy sites and had new temples built. In cases of natural disasters, it was up to him to appease the gods through pilgrimages or self-sacrifice. He was thus a mediator between earth and heaven and a speaker of the gods here. Come on now, we're talking Malakim Aleph. Moctezuma had his brother and his entourage murdered, they say. And he excluded from power the merit nobility who had ascended under his predecessors in favor of the hereditary nobility. So Moctezuma got rid of putting people up just based off merit. He wanted to go back to the bloodline nobility, back to the original kings and queens. Through his crackdown, it had a disastrous impact on the Triple Alliance. So again, Moctezuma was triple crossed in the end anyways, because he was wrecking shop with the previous nobility and reinstating other principles, and it became increasingly flagrant to claim supremacy of the Talal Tawani of Tenochtitlan. The image of Moctezuma II passed down to us is undoubtedly muddled. We're talking Moctezuma Xocoyotzin, the last of the Mexicans, and the fall of Tenochtitlan. The Talal Tawani is blamed for the Mexica's demise because he had failed to appease the wrath of the gods and restore the world order. But the world of the Mexica had already fallen into disarray. So as much as Moctezuma Xocoyotzin did, he couldn't undo the sins of his fathers or the sins of the other predecessors that brought destruction on the Mexica. According to the Florentine Codex, there had been worrying omens in Moctezuma's empire before the arrival of the Spaniards. One being a threatening image in the sky at night in the east, and the temple of the god Huitzilopochtli was set on fire and could not be extinguished with water. So again, the idols are burning and they cannot be put out. The third omen was a lightning bolt that struck the temple of the god of fire, Shui Hektekutli, without thunder. So again, these omens were happening prior to the Spanish. A comet also appeared in the sky, and there was a catastrophic flooding at Lake Mexico, even though there was no storm. The sixth omen is said to have been a woman who was heard at night mourning the fall of the city, and a fisherman caught a strange bird with a mirror between his head feathers. The eighth omen was to do with disfigured individuals, and according to Camargo, mentioning the same omens, the people of Mexico understood all of these as signs of the end of the world and the arrival of new peoples on earth. So again, they couldn't undo their destruction. Historians and ethnohistorians have long debated about the authenticity of this interpretation. Conventional studies assume that the confusion of the Spanish with gods was the most prominent reason for the rapid collapse of the Mexica Empire. In contrast, ethnohistorical literature of the late 20th century often dismisses the prophecies and the return of the gods as myths, essentially invented by Christian chroniclers. So all this they try to tell you, they thought it was the gods returning, or they thought Quetzalcoatl was returning. We don't know this to be true. This essentially could have been invented by Christian chroniclers to legitimize their own conquest. So don't believe the lies here. Here's where you dodge the hijack on these so-called prophecies of the return of the gods. These indigenous narratives, or what they created, were just to legitimize the conquest of the Spaniards or the resulting Spanish rule and Christianization, not necessarily the truth. The city at the foot of the Popocatépetl and Iztaccíhuatl volcanoes could boast 1,000 years of history. These symbols of their rightful rule. For this reason, Spanish chroniclers compare the city with Rome or Mecca. So again, the devil's in the details. We checked out the old world buildings. They look magnificent. We're talking comparable to Rome or Mecca, and large numbers of temples. There was the Great Pyramid dedicated to Quetzalcoatl, which was the world's largest in terms of its dimensions. So again, dodge the hijack. Them telling you the pyramids are over there. You got the world's largest in terms of dimensions right here in Mexico. The conquistadors later reported that Quetzalcoatl was the mythical founder of the city, who once banned human sacrifice and whose return was anticipated. So this so-called Quetzalcoatl is a culture hero. Cuauhtémoc entrusted to the exceptional warrior Tlalpaltecatl or Putin the weapons and armor of his father, Ahuitzotl, and designed both to protect its wearer and terrify its observer. It was called, and its wearer became Quetzalcoatl, who also given the bow and arrow of the god Huitzilopochtli. So again, in fact, the Florentine Codex tells us that the enemies froze at the sight of Quetzalcoatl and fled. The very next night, they saw a fire that approached like a whirlwind. Again, we're talking a fire approached like a whirlwind. This is angel action here. It went continually spinning about. It was as if the blazing coal broke into many pieces. Consequently, Ixtlilxochitl had all of his gold of his hometown Texcoco collected, whereupon Cortez showed mercy and released Coanacoc. So again, they're giving them gold to release slaves. Again, don't forget, this is all about slavery and oppression and Christianization of these new lands. Many more Indians were mauled by dogs, hung, or burned alive so that they would reveal the secret to him, but without success. So again, they're tortured over this gold. The conquistadors shed more tears over this than the crimes they committed. The Crown commissioned Cortez to undertake further exploration of the South Sea. The Marquis had stressed in his letter reports that only the discovery and mastery of the sea route through the Pacific would make Charles V the king of the world. So again, it's not just happening here, it's happening in Europe, and Charles V is trying to become king of the world. I mean, the entire world here. This is real Game of Thrones. This is better than the rest. I mean, you can't make this up. Competition with Viceroy Mendoza broke out in 1539 for the discovery of the legendary 7 golden cities of Cibola in the unknown north of New Spain. So they land in Mexico, But they learned that there's possibly these 7 gold cities of Cibola in what we would know to be southwestern United States up through Colorado. At any rate, his vessels explored California, named after the chivalric novel character Califia, but the mythical island inhabited by black women, so called, was never found, they say. So again, we're just connecting the dots here. You cannot make this up. The term Indio emerged, which subsumed the various indigenous ethnic groups. So again, there's a certain group of people in the world who keep getting reclassified and renamed over and over and over again. This nomenclature for everyone involved in constantly renegotiating. So again, constantly renegotiating the names of these people. But for now, they're called Indios, as was the equation of Indio with poverty and backwardsness. So again, Indio is also a term used in the replacement of the N word as the equation of Indio with poverty and backwardness. That did not reflect this duality. After the fall of Tenochtitlan, Mexico was a politically blend of overlapping and competing regimes. So, again, some people got X'd out, renamed, and reclassified as Indios. In return, the encomenderos were responsible for the military protection, education, and Christianization of the indigenous people. So all the Spanish, their job was to re-educate and turn them into Christians. The conquistadors and colonists who wanted to become rich treated the indigenous population like slaves. I mean, what more do you need me to do? I mean, you have a place that's full of people that already know how to work the land, are already familiar with the land, who can make sure the Spaniards don't get themselves killed. And the indigenous population were turned into slaves, man. Particularly those who knew how to grow and work with cotton. He linked them to indigenous forms of labor and foreign collectors of tributes and labor. The indigenous nobility initially played a central role as mediators. This was clearly demonstrated. So, at times, even the own kings or rulers of these indigenous populations were trying to play both sides, trying to weasel their way out of the situation, but there was nowhere to go. So, all they really did was just sell out their own people. A key argument was its importance in the Christianization of the indigenous population and their eradication of their religious ideas. If the victory of the Spaniards was presented as being divinely ordained, it was also the starting point for the Christianization mandate. So again, them saying that the return of the gods and they were in awe of the Spaniards, that's BS. It was just a tool used to Christianization of the Indians. From the beginning, however, Christianization also served political purposes. On the other hand, it was implemented systematically only after several years, once there was no longer any danger of a major uprising by various indigenous groups. Come on now. Cortez had ordered the destruction of indigenous religious artifacts. So they were destroying temples, they were destroying books, they were destroying people. I mean, the list goes on. The decision to destroy the main temple did not fail to have an impact on the Mexica's will to resist. The Spanish published or punished any public practice of the traditional faith, and the indigenous priests were severely persecuted and killed. So it was illegal to practice what was going on here prior to the Spanish. They wanted you to be Christians. They wanted you to accept Jesus. The Indios, in their view, were nothing more than stubborn children. Together with the members of the first Audiencia, it was endowed with the title of Protector of the Indians. So they come up with these titles saying they're supposed to be protecting the Indians, all the while they're enslaving and unaliving them. The fight against the material remnants of the Mesoamerican religion. There were valuable codices collected and burned. Temples were also destroyed. In his instructions to Cortez, Charles V had already expressed his optimism regarding the conversion of the indigenous population. He knew he was dealing with a highly evolved empire. The main focus was on gaining geographic and economic information, so he needed intel from the indigenous, so he knew how to move, learn about other places he could rob, steal, you know. Information gathering concentrated on ethnographic details, so they needed to understand these people and their practices and everything that they knew in order to subjugate them and steal their land and their buildings and their name. Afterward, the Council of the Indies continuously requested further documentation, initiated the first ethnographic studies. There were cultural aspects of the different ethnic groups before and during the conquest. This resulted in numerous reports and chronicles. King Philip II had the ethnographic books to do with Old Mexico confiscated and kept under lock and key. So again, your ethnographic books were either burned, confiscated, or destroyed. They don't want you to know who you were prior to their arrival. The old belief certainly lived on in private. So the Mexica were still doing their thing, but they had to give the Spanish the idea that they were following along. So they were just playing undercover. They had to move different. This was reflected in, among other things, nutrition, clothing, language, and hairstyles. They usually did not acquire a deeper understanding of Christianity. So they weren't in it to win it. They just were playing along, so they would leave them alone. The voluntary acceptance of baptism was often only a strategy to continue living undisturbed, while retaining as much as possible the rituals that were considered essential for survival. So again, the Spaniards thought they were converting them, but all the indigenous were doing were just saying, yep, okay, whatever you say, cool, bet. But then in private, they were doing what they had been doing before, trying to preserve their beliefs and ancestors, and retained as much as possible information that was needed but considered essential for survival, O Jacob. Halal. Oh, let me know what y'all think. Leave a note in the comments.